Welcome to Pathways to Progress. We are kicking off season 4 in this new format with me as your host, Roberto Rodriguez. And we're back where it all started. I don't know if I mentioned this, but we filmed our very first episode of Pathways to Progress about more than 3 years ago, right here in Portland Media Center, in front of the windows with Congress Street as a backdrop. For our first guest today, which I'm really excited about, is someone that I think has an incredibly interesting story, is Ethan Strimling, who is a politician, activist, nonprofit leader, TV commentary. I don't know, what do you use to describe yourself these days?
Activist is good, organizer is good, just continuing to try to do the work to make the world a little better. So,
well, Happy New Year to you, and thank you so much for hanging out with me today. So Ethan served 3 terms in the Maine State Senate. He was mayor of Portland. He was director of Learning Works for almost like 20 years, like 17, 18
19 years. Yeah.
19 years. You've been involved in numerous campaigns here in Portland and throughout the state of Maine. You've just been all over the place. But I want to get started before that. For me, context is incredibly important, right? Like, how did we arrive here? As I reflect on early life, a lot of my political views and ideas were really influenced by a lot of early experiences. What was it like growing up in New York City, and any moments or people early in life that influenced you and your leadership style?
So my parents split when I was very young, when I was about 3. So I've always said I was raised by 2 single parents, because I sort of was with my mother for the first, once they split, for the first 5 or 6 years, and then she moved out west and I stayed back east with my father in New York. And he raised me through junior high school and into college. And both of my parents were very politically active. My mother was a real street activist, feminist. My father was he was fighting around nuclear disarmament a lot of Central America policies. My father got arrested out in Colorado for protesting a nuclear power plant out there. So they both had this real activist. And so it was instilled in me pretty young. And I'm very appreciative of that from what my parents gave me, because it just gave me this sense of social justice, that your work, whatever it is. My mother's a professor at UCLA. She's retired now, but always had politics in what she talked about, an analyst, questioning authority. My mother, when I was 12 or 13, took me down to Nicaragua. So it was my first real experience with real poverty. The Sandinistas had just taken power down there, and we were just down there like building trenches and trying to figure out how to build some homes. It gave me a real connection to low-income folks.
I first got to know you around when the discussions for the elementary schools here in Portland to renovate them were taking place. It was around 2015. At the time, you were known, at least in my circles, you were known as like the education mayor. And in other circles, you were known as like the activist mayor. And I'm sure you were called all sorts of different things.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm wondering what these labels mean to you. And particularly, you've championed issues around minimum wage, sick leave. What do these labels mean to you? And is there another policy that you've worked on that you think is a more appropriate way to describe you?
If you look at the for-school bond, the ban on pesticides, the property tax relief, it's all about income inequality, right? It's all about sort of how do we start breaking this cycle of generational poverty. So whether you call me an education mayor or economic mayor or that bastard mayor, whatever it is, I think what you'll always find with me is that the work that I was doing was around trying to break that cycle of generational poverty. You do the work that needs to be done, and whether you're inside the building or outside the building, you have to have that activist spirit. Government works best when people are really engaged in it. Electing me was the easiest part. Right now is the hard part, where you got to show up and you've got to keep pushing. I think, as FDR often said, now make me do it. And so when I was mayor, I gladly took that badge of activist mayor, of trying to activate the community to push the council hard, and it ruffled some feathers. It made some rough times, but we made the most advances from a policy perspective of the city that we've made in any 4-year period, at least coming out of the mayor's office.
I spent over the last 3 years with Councilor Pelletier, with Tori and I doing the show, coming from like the activism and organizing world, and then stepping into elected office, and how does that translate, and how do you remain effective? Chatting with her about it, it gave me tons of insight. Your experience was different, again, because you were mayor, and you mentioned John Jennings. So I want to chat a little bit about that. Incredibly well-documented tensions.
Yes.
I like the word tension.
Yeah.
Between you and the then city manager, John Jennings. Because it was such a big issue over your term. Tell me what you learned from it and lessons learned.
And I appreciate you asking it, because I thought about it before I came down here, and you had told me that, hey, I want to talk to you about this a little bit. And I realized I don't think I've really talked about it publicly very much. So I don't want to relive it either, because it's a very difficult moment. But look, when I first got there, I tried to work with John quite a bit, talk to him, call him all the time. We'd have lunch, trying to sort of find ways to, and I was suggesting, look, I'd like to meet every day. Let's just sit down and talk. And that was not his style. It's not what he wanted. You worked with him as well too. He was very much into what he was going to do. And it started with India Street, right? I mean, in that first budget, when he had proposed India Street, and my office had not really been brought into any of the conversations about that, and I would have communicated that probably was not going to be something people supported, and I gave a speech calling that out. My only wish about that, in terms of from the public perspective, is that it didn't become a personality battle, that it became a policy battle, which is what it was. And I got to own some of that. I think some of that's my personality. That's kind of how I come across. Can get a little angry, let myself go, and not talk about the policy enough. And then when I tried to shift it back, it was a little bit too late. But in the end, the substance got passed, right? We won the 4-school bond. We protected India Street. We passed corporate welfare reform. We got property tax relief for low-income seniors. We passed a pesticide ban. We can go down the list. And you don't pass substantial policy without ultimately there being a fight. Because if you're passing something where there's no fight, it's probably not that substantial.
I was going to say the same thing, that it was unfortunate that the conversation wasn't centered around the policy discussion, that it was personality, oh, this guy is not a team player and blah, blah, he's selfish. Like you said, I appreciate you taking ownership and saying that you played a role in that as well. And I think in some of the challenges that I've had over the time, I'll own that I had some, tensions, so to speak, with the manager, but mine were never personalities. It was always policy based, and it never crossed that line. For me, it was the SRO discussion and the encampment discussion. Our ideas and our political, decisions are really based on our morals, right? And you're not going to compromise these things. And if you see an injustice and you come to kind of like the way that we were kind of brought up in seeing the world, you're going to fight for it.
There were personality pieces with both of us, but in the end, it was a power battle, right? It was a power battle about a new charter, and about whether the mayor and whether the people were saying, we want our voice loud and proud in City Hall, fighting for us. And an old system, a city, and we're still struggling with this, right? We're still trying to find our way through. And I think even elected officials on there now are still sort of saying, how does this work, right? The city manager's not elected. We had a city manager in my instance, I can only speak to that one, where, he saw the power in city with him. And I saw the power of the policy in my office. That ultimately was the clash, right? It wasn't personalities. There was some ideological, for sure. City manager did not want the 4-school bond to pass, most of the stuff I just mentioned. But in the end, it was about who had the power to do stuff. And I'm just a believer, you've got to keep that power with elected officials, with democracy. That's the only way we're going to make things work better. So,
and to your point, it kicked off the initiative to get the charter reopened, yes, and a big proposal to change our government structure, which did not pass. And I'll tell you this, and I have not talked about this. I didn't support, I think it was question 1 at the time. I don't know if question 1 was the answer, but now I find myself sort of kind of having the same conversation. I was like, is this the best way to get stuff done? Because the most frustrating part of my 3 years in the council was how difficult it is to create change. Thank you, first of all, because it created, again, when I said that my experience was really policy based and not like personalities, hopefully you cleared that out. It's like, hey, let's keep this clean.
Even in the most democratic systems, in the legislature, I've served in the Senate, there's frustrations with how that works, and it's hard to make change. It's incremental. But I do think that we will ultimately have to get to a place where we used to be in Portland, in which we had an elected mayor who was the executive authority of the city, who was accountable to the people. That was thrown out because we didn't want immigrants being able to vote for the mayor, right? It's just black and white. And it happened in cities all over America that immigrants, at that time Catholics, Irish Catholics, especially Italians, Jews, were gaining a bigger voice. And we need to get back to a place where we have an elected mayor. It's not going to solve all the problems, but at least it'll make stuff more transparent. And the one part of question 1 that I almost wish they had separated out was paying counselors, right? You guys have got to get, counselors have got to get paid better. Man. and you need better staff, right? You have no staffing right now, and that's by design. So you don't have somebody to create policy for you, to be able to help you draft stuff, think through stuff, do constituent work. That's really the core of democracy. You can only be reactive if you don't have anybody helping you. So
I'm my like month and a half or 2 months out of office, and I'm blown away by the amount of time that I have available now. Like, because you're sort of kind of in the mix of it. You don't realize it. And now it's like, man, I look at my calendar, I'm like, I can do anything anytime now.
Yeah.
So you're right, like for pennies. It rules it out as an opportunity for so many of us to even consider running for office, just because time and financial needs.
And the mayor is paid well, and that's a good part of it. It's a full-time gig, but the mayor has no staff still, right? One of my big battles was just getting somebody to help. Brought Jason in, and then within a year he was fired. They saw that when there's two of us, it's a lot more ability to get stuff done.
So you've sort of kind of approached, change or creating change from different avenues, elected office, activism, campaigns. What does effective decision-making and policy-making look like to you?
Yeah, and don't forget in that list, my work at Learning Works and the importance of the change that happens there, right? So we work with at-risk kids, adjudicated kids, immigrants, and we use education as a tool to try to break generational poverty. But when you live in that world for almost 20 years, like I did, you see the structural problems that keep that situation in place. Like no matter how hard I was working to keep kids out of jail, there's too many structural paths and too many structural pressures that are going to put that kid back in, right? Whether you got a JCCO who just wants to violate you because you happen to smoke a cigarette at age 16 or some simple thing and now you're back in jail, right? Come on. We're trying to keep this kid in jail as opposed to trying to keep them out, or this immigrant family, we're trying to keep them from learning English as opposed to providing the tools so they can get a job. I mean, not even allowed to get a job. It's important to see the change both in the political world and the social service world and all of the worlds that we work in. Look as deeply as you can at the structural problems. We spend a lot of time on the top layer. Really good leadership is leadership that really tries to get underneath that top layer and say, okay, what's causing this problem to exist, right? I got a building here, it needs a paint job, I can repaint it, or I can try to figure out why did that paint peel off. I get very frustrated and with elected officials who get into office and say, that's not my lane. If it's a problem, if it's injustice, you should be working on it. The person who's walking by us out there who's got nowhere to sleep tonight, they really don't care what lane you're in, except if you're saying you're not my problem.
The way that I see things, there's 9 different ways to be a counselor at any given time, or 8 in mayor. So we each bring like our own view and our own approach to it. Some people, if you come from the activism and organizing background, you're there, you're calling stuff out, you're the truth teller. And then you have other people that are like just policy wonks, right? Like people can just dive into like an ordinance and into our charter. In any given time, when you're in the council, you're gonna have a couple of these crossovers, right? Like the truth teller, activism, the policy wonk, and all you have to do is work together. And to your point, not ignore it, not be like, that's not my lane. It might not be your lane, but there's somebody in this dais that you can partner with that agrees with you, that can help you champion stuff. And it's like collaboration and stuff. That to me, that's what I learned, is that you can't do shit alone. You can't do any of that stuff alone. And so finding those partners and not turning, like you said, not saying like, oh, that's not my lane. It's like, find a way to make it your lane.
There isn't a single person on the city council, the folks that I fought the most with, that I didn't work with at some point, right? You have to. Like Belinda Ray and I, we were at odds all the time, but we worked together on paid sick leave to try to get there. Or Spencer Thibodeau working on the issue around the 4-school bond, or the pesticide ban, right? Spencer was a great leader behind this pesticide ban. So you always find places to work with people even that you disagree with. I think you're right. There are people who are total policy wonks and people who are total visionaries. There are folks who like have all the ideas. But for me, ideas are a dime a dozen, right? They're easy. And then there's the implementers in the world, the people who can actually make things happen. And those are the ones that I really respect. The ones who are the greatest, the Barack Obamas of the world, can be both these remarkable visionaries. And Barack Obama is probably the most wonkiest policy geek, reads every bill he's ever saw. That's what I aspire to be both visionary and do the hard work.
Those, we would describe them as bridge builders, which are the ones that kind of make it all happen, and they tend to be reformed truth tellers.
Sure.
So you find, again, because your goal is just to get stuff done.
You also have to understand where the populace is. What Barack Obama or Abraham Lincoln were so good at, they were just far enough ahead of the populace to try to pull the populace along to get to where they wanted to go. Like, do I believe that from the beginning Abraham Lincoln wanted to get rid of slavery? Absolutely. But did he declare that on his way up to finally being able to do that? No. I do like those who push those boundaries a little more. Obviously, I'm one of those kind of guys. I like to, perhaps I get a little further ahead of the electorate than I should at times.
More recently, you've been doing some political analysis, some TV commentating, which I think is, in my view, sort of kind of puts you in the complete opposite spectrum, where now you're not the target. You're actually looking out there and giving your opinions on things. But now being on TV more like after your elected office career, what has that been like?
I enjoy it for sure. It's an opportunity. It keeps me very engaged with what's going on. It keeps me connected to a lot of the people who are in elected office now, keeps those communications going. And in a lot of ways, it's freeing too. When you talk about being the truth teller, you can be even more of a truth teller now because you're not in elected office. The columns that I write or the analysis that I do that feels most natural is celebrating progressives who are standing tall and calling out Democrats, honestly, who don't live up to the vision of what we expect of them.
Anything else that you're currently working on that you want to share with people, since you have an opportunity, our great viewership here that we're, but yeah, anything else that you want to share with us that you're working on now?
I've been doing quite a bit of sort of activist work. I do a lot of stuff with DSA for a Livable Portland, which is kind of the political arm, People First Portland. DSA has become a very important force in the city, right? We have rent control because of DSA. We have a higher minimum wage because of DSA. We have the Green New Deal in place because of DSA, which is building more affordable housing and creating better environmental standards. I would encourage folks to really get involved in whatever group in the community that you are connected to. But probably the thing I'm most proud in terms of my activism is tenant union work right now. I went through this battle the last year in which my landlord spent 3 years and probably $100,000 on his side trying to evict me out of my home. And tenants are really seen as second-class citizens. And most of us have been tenants at some point, but you move out, like it's this thing you don't want to be part of. And so there is this real focus on landlords and private property rights and their right versus a tenant's right to their home. But that work, it's all volunteer. Just that's always the kind of work that's the most inspiring. And I really love that work, so I'm looking forward to it.
Great, and really important work. And rental issues and tenants' rights have come up more recently. They've been more, they have a little bit more awareness now. So thank you for doing that. Again, a class of our residents here that we weren't paying attention to for a while. And finishing the show, we're going to go through a couple of rapid fire questions,
all right.
And just then wrap it up after that.
Are they going to be? Is there math involved or? Maybe a little bit. Maybe. All right.
Best pizza in Portland. You're a New Yorker. This means a lot.
Know,
You're going to be held.
I know. Favorite pizza in Portland is probably flatbread. I love flatbread.
All right, good.
It's always
We'll take
good.
it. All right, that's
flatbread's
nice.
Very good. So I love Lazari over on the West End. Right near where I live. So there's all of them are great.
All right. New Year's resolutions. Waste of time or good self-development tool?
No. I do New Year's resolutions every year. Yeah, I do think that they're important. And it's funny. I do New Year's resolutions. I always send them my best friend and I share them with my partner. But this year I want to call my brother more often. That was one of the ones that I feel like I need to do. Another one that I have is I got to stretch. I just am like the stiffest person on the planet. I love to read, and I want to spend more time with Stephanie, as much time as I possibly can. So, but I think New Year's resolutions are great. Write them up, keep them simple, accountable, and then put them away. So, you know what? Actually, I'm going to tell you one more, a secret one. Don't tell anybody. Right?
Between you and me, yeah.
Just you and me. I want to learn to become a school bus driver.
Love it. We need them.
We
need them.
I know everybody always needs it. I'm like, how much fun would that be working with kids like that? It just would keep me connected to the community. So maybe this year I'll get that.
So I've had like a chronic one, like I've had for years, and it was this year I'm gonna ask more questions and give fewer answers. And I did that for a while. But then this year, 2025, I'm a new man. Right. So I actually have some selfish ones.
Do you? All right.
I want to spend more time fishing.
Okay, good.
And I want to spend more time with my family. Next, Luigi Mangione, villain or hero?
Oh, you can't celebrate somebody who murders somebody in cold blood like that. You certainly understand the outcry around the healthcare system and sort of what people are so frustrated by. But no, you're not a hero when you use that tool. It's remarkable how how many people have seen him as a hero.
I love the discussion that's coming out of it, but you're right. We need to be careful about who we idolize and the actions that these folks are taking. $700 million, Juan Soto to the New York Mets. Is that
765?
765? Oh my God.
765.
Practically $1 billion. Huge waste of money, or we'll see you in the World Series.
Oh,
I know
maybe.
you're a big Mets fan.
I'm a huge Mets fan.
I know.
So here's my we'll see you in the World Series. Not a waste of money. But look, I mean, think about it even from our politics. And I know I'm rationalizing like crazy, but it's just a redistribution of wealth. Because Steve Cohen's got all that money, so it's going from the uber wealthy to another very wealthy guy. But I always say, let the players get as much money as they can. I'm all for unions. I'm all for players. Every penny you can get. And Steve Cohen's got so much of it. I would like to take every penny I could from Steve Cohen and give it to other people.
I like it. People always like talk about athletes getting paid too much. I'm always like, somebody writes that check.
I know,
like,
exactly.
And you don't even know who they are. Yeah.
And would you turn it down? I would love to meet the person who said, "No, I'll take 600 million over 765."
Professional athletes' careers are short, right? So you just bank as much as you can in a short period of time. Hopefully you won't get hurt before that happens.
Yeah. We've got some good Puerto Rican players on the Mets too.
Yeah, of course. So the people always say that the NFL has like script writers and
Yeah,
if baseball had really good script writers, we'll have like the Yankees and Mets World Series, which no one here like New England cares about it.
I know.
But
That'd be fun.
That
would be
great,
fun.
great
I know.
story.
That would be fun.
And then last question, and this is something that I'm stealing from one of my favorite podcasts. It's All the Smoke. Who would you like to see as a guest here in Pathways to Progress? And the only catch is that you have to help us get them on.
But let me ask you, and I asked you this before you started recording, let me ask you on tape, what kind of guests do you want?
I have like pipe dream of like my ideal guest or my dream guest. It'll be Barack Obama and Bad Bunny. And so they say like
together.
Well, actually, that would be amazing. So there's a lot of like crossover here because so Bad Bunny, obviously, world-known global artist, but I'm really politically active, particularly in Puerto Rico. And so I would probably have a conversation with him both about his art and about politics. And Barack Obama, I would just shut up and have him talk.
Yeah, right. There's a guy named Tom Andrews who used to be the congressman from this district back in the early 90s. And he's kind of been out of it for a while. And I think it'd be really interesting to hear. I mean, he's been doing a lot of international work. So if you're interested in him, I'm happy to follow up with you about that.
Definitely. I'll hold you up to that. Thank you so much for watching. We are on every Friday at 7 p.m. on the Portland Media Center, Channel 5. We're also going to be streaming on YouTube, and we'll be putting out clips and promos on our social media. So make sure to follow us, and we'll see you next month.